Everybody, today Honey is going to read Wayside School Gets a Little Stranger, written by Louis Schechter and illustrated by Tim Houts. Chapter 16 Mr. Poop. Joy, Mauricia, and Jenny were playing jump rope on the playground. School hadn't started yet. Mauricia and Jenny were twirling. Joy sang as she jumped. My mama wore pajamas to the grocery store. She smashed a bunch of eggs on the grocery floor. 1 dozen, 2 dozen, 4 dozen, 6. She dumped a bunch of jelly jars into the mix. Grape jelly, apricot, don't forget cherry, orange marmalade, and wild strawberry. A man walked by and fell in the gloop. He lived next door to the barber shop. His icky sticky body got covered in hair. He tore a hole in his under. Joy tripped over the rope. It wasn't her fault. Mauricia had suddenly stopped twirling. Hey, said Joy, what's the big idea? Look, said Mauricia. A very handsome stranger was walking towards them. The girls stared at him. Good morning, Mauricia, said the stranger. Jenny, Joy. How do you know my name? Mauricia asked nervously. She wasn't supposed to talk to strangers. I've known you a long time, said the stranger. I see you almost every day. Mauricia was beginning to feel scared. She looked around for Louis, the yard teacher, but she didn't see him. I can scream real loud, she warned. Oh my gosh, said Jenny. It's Louis. Mauricia looked at the stranger. He sort of looked like Louis, except his hair was combed, his shirt was tucked in, he was wearing a tie. There was no skin between his nose and mouth. He had shaved off his mustache. That's Mr. Louis to you, said Louis. I'm a teacher, and I expect to be treated with respect. You want to play jump rope, Mr. Louis? Asked Mauricia. Louis was great at jump rope. He could even do it blindfolded. He was the one who taught Joy the song he was singing at the beginning of this story. No, thank you, Mauricia, said Louis. I don't play games. I'm an adult. But you're the yard teacher, said Jenny. No, I'm a professional playground supervisor, Louis corrected her. He walked away. Wow, whispered Mauricia. I never knew Louis was so handsome. Jenny patted her head. I think I'm in love, she said. I thought he looked kind of goofy, said Joy. Up in the class, everyone was talking about the new Louis. He looked so weird without his mustache, said Calvin. He's handsome, said Phoebe. He got mad at me for running across the blacktop, complained John. He made me go all the way back from the edge of the blacktop, then walk across it. And I have to call him Mr. Lewis. I'm very proud of Lewis, said Mr. Drazill. He has always been a troublemaker, but I think he's trying to be good. We should all give him a chance. Joyce stared at Mrs. Drazill. It's your fault, she thought. You made him shave off his mustache. At recess, Louis refused to pass out the balls. I haven't washed them yet, he said. You're going to wash the balls? Asked Eric Bacon. They're filthy, said Louis, and they all have the wrong amount of air in them. I don't care, said Eric Fry. I do, said Louis. Before I can let you play with them, I have to clean them and pump them with the precious amount of air as specified by Poops. Poops? Asked Eric Evans. The professional organization of playground supervisors, exclaimed Louis. She showed them the Poops handbook. Well, what are we supposed to do? Said Eric Fry. Just play and have fun, said Louis. But remember, stay off the grass. No running on the blacktop, no eating, and no excessive shouting. The three Erics walked away. What a booger brain, muttered Eric Bacon. Louis heard him. That's Mr. Booger Brain to you, young man, he said. The next day, when the kids tried to go outside for recess, They only made it down for the fourth floor. The stairs were completely jammed with other kids from lower classrooms. Hey, what's going on? Shouted Joy. Louis won't let anyone outside, somebody shouted back. He's painting the blacktop. But I have to go to the bathroom, yelled Stephen. Now he's gone too far, said Joy. Excuse me, out of my way. Sorry, coming through, she said as she squeezed in and out of kids, crawling through legs, climbed over their heads until she made her way to the door at the bottom of the stairs. Louis was slopping black paint across the blacktop. Joy could see him through the glass door. Next to him was a big bucket of paint. Mr. Lewis! She shouted so loud that even kids backed up in the fourth floor and put their hands over their ears. He came to the door. What are you doing? Joy demanded. The blacktop isn't black, explained Lewis. It's gray. A blacktop is supposed to be black. It's right here on the page 43 of the Poop's Handbook. He opened the book and showed page 43 to Joy. Joy grabbed the book and threw it across the gray top. It landed plop in the bucket of black paint. All the kids behind her cheered. You're the Poop, said Joy. Lucy's red face turned even redder. The place where its mustache used to be turned purple. It's Mr. Poop to you, he said. Chapter 17. Why the children decided they had to get rid of Mrs. Dressel. She was nice. I made cookies for everyone this morning, Mrs. Dressel announced. Everyone cheered. She thought of ways to make learning interesting. I made five dozen cookies, she said. There are 12 cookies in a dozen. So who can tell me how many cookies I have? Joe waved his arm back and forth. I know, he said. Okay, Joe, said Mrs. Dressel. How many cookies did I make? 5 dozen, Joe said proudly. She was patient. Yes, I made 5 dozen cookies, said Mrs. Dressel. I told you that. But how many cookies are there? 5 dozen, said Joe. But how many cookies are in 5 dozen? Asked Mrs. Dressel. Huh? asked Joy. How much is 12 times 5? asked Mrs. Dressel. Wait a second, said Joe. Can I use pencil and paper? Certainly, said Mrs. Dressel. Joy took out a piece of paper and pencil. He wrote the number 5 on the piece of paper, then tore it into 12 pieces. 60, he said. Nobody quite understands Joe's mathematical methods. 4, she was fair. Yes, there are 60 cookies, she said, and there is 28 children in the class. So, how many cookies should each child get? Bibi raised her hand. 100, she said. You can't have 100 cookies, said Mrs. Dressel. I only made 60. Bake some more, said Bibi. I made 60, said Mrs. Dressel. I'm not making any more. Okay, Bibi said with a sigh. I'll take 60. We have to divide them evenly, said Mrs. Dressel. How many cookies should each child get so that every child gets the same amount? John raised his hand. Everyone can have 2 cookies, he said, and there will be 4 left over. Can I have them? asked Bibi. Allison raised her hand. Everyone can have exactly 2 and 1/7 cookies, she said. Very good, Allison, said Mrs. Dressel. And John, you are right too. She gave everyone exactly 2 and 1/7 cookies. 5. She was a good cook. Best cookies I ever had in my whole life, said Stephen. Everyone agreed. I got the recipe from Miss Marsh, said Mrs. Dressel. You did? Several kids said together. I just added a pinch of this and a little of that, said Mrs. Dressel. 6. She knew what a goose egg was. Jason, would you please open the door? She said. Everyone gasped. What's the matter? She asked. You said the D word, said Dana. Door? asked Mrs. Dressel. Everyone gasped again. You're supposed to call it a goose egg, exclaimed Dana. Who says so? said Mrs. Dressel. Mr. Kidwater, said Dana. Mr. Kidwater is a goose egg, said Mrs. Dressel. Yes, Mrs. Dressel was smart. She was nice. She made learning interesting. She was patient and fair, and she even could make Miss Mush's cookies taste good. But she made Louis shave off his mustache, and so she had to go. Chapter 18. The Blue Notebook. They had a plan. It all depended on Shuri. Everyone just hoped she wouldn't fall asleep first. Shuri often fell asleep in class. Come on, Shuri, thought Dee. You can do it. Shuri looked out the window. The sky was full of big, fluffy clouds. She yawned. The clouds looked like giant pillows. Shuri imagined herself wrapping up in one of those clouds, soft and cozy. She pulled her blue and red overcoat snugly over her head. Her eyes closed, then they opened wide. What? She shouted. Shuri, asked Mrs. Drezil. Look, shouted Shuri, pointing out the window. It's a... Hurry! Her long eyelashes stuck straight out. Mrs. Drezil hurried to Shuri's desk. What is it? A spaceship, said Shuri, from outer space. On the other side of the room, Dee dropped her pencil. She bent down to pick it up, then stayed down. Dee was part of the plan, too. She had a dangerous mission. She had volunteered for it. She felt it was her duty, since she was the one who had brought Louis up to meet Mrs. Drezil in the first place. You don't have to do it, Ron had told her. Mrs. Drezil will have seen Louis sooner or later. No, I'll do it, Didi said, bravely replied. Now she crawled across the floor. Mrs. Drezil looked out the window. Where? She asked. What? It went behind the cloud, said Shuri. What did it look like? Asked Mrs. Drezil. Like a giant hamburger, said Shuri, but there was a diesel stick hanging down from the bottom. Didi crawled to the teacher's desk. She reached up and quietly opened the top drawer. She removed the blue notebook. Mrs. Drezil stared out of the window. What's a diesel stick? She asked. I don't know, Shuri said very mysteriously. They don't have them here on Earth. Didi crawled safely back to her seat. At recess, everyone crowded around Didi as she went through the blue notebook. Louis once put a frog in Mrs. Drezil's shoe, she said. Why wasn't her shoe on the foot? Asked Jenny. It doesn't say, said Didi. There's a whole list of bad things Louis did, and he made it sound like Mrs. Drezil picked on him for no reason. No wonder she put a trash can on his head, said Todd. What else did he do? Asked Eric Bacon, who was always looking for new ideas. But Didi had already turned the page. There was other kids a lot worse than Louis, she said, flipping through the pages. What are you looking for? Asked Ron. I don't know yet, said Didi, but I'll know when I see that. She saw it. It was the note to Mrs. Drezil from a girl named Jane Smith. Didi read it out loud. Dear Lizard Face, guess what? I didn't do my homework again. Ha ha ha. And there's nothing you can do about it because you're too stupid and ugly. Ha ha ha. My family is moving away tomorrow, and you don't know where. Ha ha ha. Rub a monkey's tummy. By the time you got this letter, I'll be gone. Rub a monkey's tummy with your head. Love and kisses, Jane Smith. Everyone was shocked. How old is that letter? Asked Myron. Didi checked the date, and she said the math on her head. Jane Smith wrote this 26 years ago. And look, said Ron, reading over Didi's shoulder. Jane didn't do her last 12 homework assignments. After recess, Shuri saw the UFO again, and Didi returned the notebook to Mrs. Drezil's desk. Now, they had to do was find Jane Smith.